Jujutsu Kaisen is a series that is home to many mysteries. Kenjaku's origin, Sukuna's motivation, and even the current well-being of Nobara Kugisaki are all things that as of right now remain a mystery. And one of the biggest ongoing questions centers around Yuji and what his potential curse technique may be. As mentioned by Gojo in chapter 12, Sukuna's techniques were supposed to imprint on his body over time, allowing him to be one of the rare examples of someone who gains a technique well after their birth. Now, over the years, many people have wondered if Yuji has already gained Sukuna's technique, what that technique may be, and how exactly something like Dismantle and Cleave can be used when taking into account Yuji's character. Today, I'm going to be taking a crack at this myself and delivering what just may be the greatest and dumbest Yuji technique theory ever. Yuji's technique has been the subject of conversation for years, all because Gojo implied that with time, Yuji will develop them as Sukuna's vessel. Over the course of the series, what exactly Yuji will be developing and when he will be developing it have been in constant fluctuation to the readers of the series. But with the story supposedly coming to a close in the near future, and all of the pieces being put in place for a climactic battle, I think we are truly close to getting Yuji to reveal what he has, if anything. Now, when it comes to power-ups in Jujutsu Kaisen, more than anything else, I like to focus on the character aspect of it. What makes Gojo's Honored one moment, Maki's Freedom panel, and Megami's Domain expansion so important and impactful to the story is the direct relation of character growth to power growth. Megami becoming more selfish and less restrictive of himself allowed him to defeat a special grade cursed spirit. Maki acknowledging her specialness and not bogging herself down with the expectations and limitations of those around her allowed her to become just as strong as Toji. And with Gojo, we see that he ditched his connections and restrictions, becoming the honored one and reaching his full potential. In every single one of these instances, their power-ups came directly from a mindset or perspective shift, with the justification of their new abilities through the power system following suit. When it comes to Yuji, we've seen smaller examples of this sprinkled throughout the series. His first use of curse energy against the Finger Bearer, his first Black Flash against Hanami, his near-death experience against Choso, and his rage when he fought Sukuna are all examples of Yuji's character development preceding a development of his power. Whether the emotions be despair, control, acceptance, or rage, so far they have all played a part in Yuji's development as a sorcerer, but for the longest time I couldn't quite piece together how Yuji could develop a curse technique related to Sukuna and maintain the trajectory of his character. The most important thing to me when it came to him developing a technique was that his character and power-up aligned completely. Up to this point, I had kind of dismissed the idea of Yuji developing Sukuna's slashing techniques and using them in battle because I felt like it would go up against everything that he stands for as a character. But upon learning a very niche piece of information, a light bulb just went off in my head. A seed of thought that, when let expand, grew into a question that changed my thinking on this matter. What if Sukuna's techniques didn't have to go against what Yuji stands for? What if Sukuna's slashing techniques, particularly Cleave, could be used in a way that Sukuna doesn't? For example, what if Cleave didn't have to only mean he tore things apart? Now, you may think that this line of questioning is stupid and crazy, but I'm going to ask you to stay with me here, at least for now. You see, Cleave as a word in the most well-known and most used context means to divide or cut apart. But cleave isn't a word that has only one definition. In fact, it is one of the few words in the English language that is a contronym, essentially meaning that it has two separate contradicting meanings. So while cleaving can mean that you are splitting or cutting something apart, by definition, it can also mean that you are bringing something together and fixing it. The exact opposite of what Sukuna does with his technique. What if Yuji develops the Cleave curse technique only to use it to save, heal, and fix the damage that Sukuna causes his allies on a physical and spiritual level? This way, he would be able to use the technique engraved onto his body by Sukuna without compromising his own morals and character to do so. This got the gears turning in my head instantly, because this small nugget of knowledge immediately removed any roadblocks I felt existed for Yuji learning and then utilizing Sukuna's technique. Not only would it become something that doesn't have to harm people, but it would also fit perfectly with his character as someone who has dedicated their life to saving and helping people. A technique that allows him to do that at the same level that Sukuna destroys is just perfect. This may seem like a crackpot theory, and to some extent it probably is, because I just came up with this yesterday. But with the way techniques have been established in the series, it's possible, at least in theory. Now, some may immediately jump to the conclusion that a curse technique reversal would be the only way to make something like this happen, and while using positive energy to power Yuji's cleave is possible, and actually something I will address later in this video, what I am arguing for is even crazier than that. What I'm saying is that I think Yuji's base level curse technique will have the opposite effect of Sukuna's, and make him the perfect prison for the King of Curses, even after not being his vessel anymore. We see numerous times in the series that the laws of curse techniques hinge almost entirely on interpretation. Megumi is able to store things in his shadows after being prompted by Sukuna. Kenjaku and Mahito acknowledge that their techniques operate differently simply because of how they perceive the soul in relation to the body, and Nobara was able to deal damage to Mahito's soul just because of her interpretation of her own technique, by simply taking their base understanding of their abilities and extending it in ways that one wouldn't normally expect. A sorcerer or curse is able to expand the limits of their technique and grant themselves abilities that they wouldn't have access to otherwise. Megumi's greatest jump in power actually has a line during it where he tells himself to think bigger, more freely, and expand the limits of his mind, all while interpreting his technique in a new light. This allowed him to create a shadow doppelganger, even though the most basic form of the 10 Shadows curse technique doesn't necessarily entail that he be able to do that. We see that Sukuna's knowledge and interpretation of the technique also completely changes the utilization of the 10 Shadows, further solidifying the idea that techniques are, to a large extent, determined by one's own imagination while using it. So, if all of these examples of a technique being redefined through interpretation are present in the series, why would it be impossible for Yuji to use a technique that has currently only been associated with destruction and carnage in a way that heals people and brings them together solely through his own personal interpretation of it? If the knowledge of Cleave's double meaning could somehow be given to Yuji, why wouldn't he be able to use it in a way that he sees fit? We've seen Yuji firsthand create loopholes in binding vows because he doesn't value himself as human, so we know that this ability is as available to him as it is to others. But what if he could intentionally utilize this to help him in battle? What if he could intentionally change his interpretation of something in order to make himself stronger? Now that Gojo is back in the story and likely to assist his students, it's possible that he could be the one to help Yuji along this path of discovery. We've seen Gojo train his students primarily in a way that focuses on their mentality as sorcerers, and now is the perfect time to give Yuji what he needs to expand his interpretation of what it means to have Sukuna's technique in the first place. As the one character who speculated on Yuji's curse technique development, it would definitely be very fitting to have him be the one to help Yuji bring it out and truly come full circle. I may sound crazy right now to some people, and to be completely honest, I'm half convinced I am myself. But Yuji's very character hinges upon saving people in a way perfectly antithetical to the way that Sukuna destroys. Even Yuji's very name means to help, heal, and bring peace and benevolence to. So it's very possible that Gege takes this to its extreme and have him work to undo everything that Sukuna hopes to destroy. The malevolent shrine that Sukuna possesses may just be countered by a shrine of benevolence from Yuji. Narratively, I think Yuji desiring nothing more than to foil Sukuna's plans makes sense, and logistically, there is nothing in the power system standing against the idea of Yuji changing the fundamental aspects of this technique. Maybe you disagree that his interpretation could make Cleave take on its other name, but even so, curse technique reversal works as a potential solution to this problem, and as seen with Kenjaku, the reversal of a technique can be used in battle efficiently if the user is competent enough. Whether it be through technique interpretation or curse technique reversal, Yuji developing and using Sukuna's techniques to thwart him at every turn seems like just the thing Yuji would want to do to the guy that has caused him and his friends so much suffering. The benevolence that is in Yuji's name is the potential perfect counter to the malevolence that is in Sukuna. And with Yuji's current goal being to save Megumi and beat Sukuna above all else, I think his greatest confrontation is a perfect time to evolve and bring out a technique to counter even the King of Curses.